Yes, happy Mother's Day. I know it brings up a lot of different emotions for many of us, but hopefully, wherever you are, you can celebrate appropriately. We want to celebrate you. We appreciate you that are moms. You're the most strategic leaders placed in our community, and we really appreciate you. And we have this Mother's Day photo booth out there for you to take a photo if you'd like. And I just want to share a little story. Last year, we had very meaningful photos taken of my family, and this is my family here. This is me and my wife, Jennifer. Happy Mother's Day. My son, John. That was last year. He's even taller now. And then my daughter, Gracia. And we were locked in. It's hard for us to take a family photo. It just always is. But sometimes it's not our fault. Because as we were standing there, locked in on the camera, out of the corner of our eye, we saw a black, brownish flash make its way through the door and start rounding the lobby. And my daughter loses focus first because she loves animals so much. You can see it approaching there. I see it, but I'm hold for the picture. And then we all lose it. Me and my daughter, we're like, there's a dog. We can't focus. My son's still locked in. My wife is trying so hard. Even the big dog is like, hey, big smile. Then the next photo, John's like, what's happening? And we're all like, it's a dog, it's a dog. And then the dog leaves. Time to take the photo. But how can you do that? What just happened? So that was last year. So who knows what might happen as you get your photo taken. But that honestly was one of our favorite Mother's Day or holiday photos ever. So hopefully you can take a photo out there and maybe or maybe not, it'll be as memorable. But we're in this series called Think, because what you think matters. What you think matters. Like God has gifted you this amazing brain that we don't care for it that great. We're very casual with it. But yet it's being shaped and formed and influenced all the time. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. You're actually doing computer programming in your brain. Like what you think about is creating these neural pathways that shape what you do and how you think. And the more you think something, the easier it is to think it. That's why you got to be careful when something pops in your head. Just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. But if you think about it long enough, it feels like it's true. If you do something long enough, it becomes a habit. It takes you somewhere. So we have to fight for our mind. And what I want to challenge you to do as we start the message today, I want you to think about what is something that happened this past week that got in your head. Somebody said something, you saw something, somebody did something, you did something, and it got in your head and it just kind of lived there for a while. Made itself at home, was eating breakfast up in your kitchen, just kind of hanging out, reading the paper, and it just got in your head for a while. If you could think of something, that would be helpful. Or think about something that gets in your head a lot. It's a battle you fight a lot that's a really, really tough mental battle. Think about that as we talk today, because I want to give you a strategy that really helped me, and I learned it from Craig Groeschel and his book, Winning the War in Your Mind, a hugely helpful book. And last week we talked about this. One of the things we need is a filter. In Philippians 4:8, the Apostle Paul had a filter. He said, whatever's true, whatever's noble, whatever's right, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's admirable, if anything's excellent or praiseworthy, think about those things. Or you can flip it around and say, if it's not those things, don't think about it. Don't give it extra time. Don't dwell on it. Think is actually a word that means focus or fix your mind on those things. Or it's a word, meditate, which does not mean to empty your mind. It means to focus your mind on one truth. This is a filter, and focus is your friend. If you focus on the right things, it's your friend. If you focus on the wrong things, what's not true, what's not noble, what's not right, what's not lovely, what's not excellent or praiseworthy, then that focus is your enemy, because it'll take you somewhere. Be careful what you think about. Be aware of what you're thinking about. Just because it pops in your head doesn't mean it has to stay there. And you have more control than you think about what you choose to think about. We need to be intentional. And this week, what I want to challenge you to do is we talked about filters and focus as a filter. This week, I want you to think about filters and frames. What are the filters in your mind of what you allow in or what you validate? And what are the frames? By frames, I mean, when you look at a situation, what's the deal where What do you use to validate it or to frame that moment and say, this is how I'm going to think about this moment? Because we have those. What we've learned, because our God's given us such a creative brain, science has discovered so much about our brains that God has given us, and psychology calls it cognitive biases. They're mental filters. A cognitive bias is basically, it's a way of reasoning based on personal experience or preferences. That's why two people can have the exact same experience and have completely different responses. The boss walks into one employee and says, hey, I need to give you some feedback. And they go, what gives you the right? You may be my boss, but that doesn't mean you're right. How dare you? And that boss walks in, the other person gives the exact same feedback. Thank you so much. That will help me get better. Thank you for your honesty. Two exact same thing, two different people, two different responses because they have a bias. They have a frame or a filter of how they look at life. The filters and frames you have shape how you see life. And if you aren't aware of what your filters and frames are, you're going to be very susceptible to a lot of influence that you do not want, that'll take you places you do not want to go and shape you to be someone you do not want to become. So if you can change the filter, if you can change the frame, it will change how you see or feel. And those of us who wear glasses kind of get that. I wear glasses. I don't need them for seeing far away. Like somewhere in the back corner, hold up some fingers. See, they're holding up fingers. I can see it clearly. But reading up close, I can't read anything. Like my font on my phone is so big that you almost can't fit a letter on the screen. Like I need it for up close, but because I do so much reading, I just wear glasses all the time, even though I don't need it. But what if I take this off? Boy, things look real different. But when I have the right lens on, I can see so clearly. You've got to think about the lenses, the filters and frames that you're looking through life with. Maybe you take pictures sometimes. You take a picture of yourself and go, I don't know, I like that. Then you pull a different filter. Ooh, I like that filter. Some of us are guilty of that. We change the filter to change the look. If you can change the look and the filter, you'll change about the way you see life. Again, it's called a cognitive bias. It's a default filter. We're pre-wired to interpret situations based on the filter of how we look at life and how it makes us feel. Cognitive bias is simply what we might call a default filter. It's what our brain is pre-wired to think of in a certain way or interpret a situation, even if our interpretation isn't completely accurate. But our mind is already fixed in this certain reality. Again, it's why we look at two different things two different ways, or one thing two different ways. And it's not that the facts are different, it's the filter that's different. And I'll give you an example from history. In Numbers, the Old Testament, Numbers chapter 13 and 14, there's a story of where Moses is sending in some spies to look at the land that God has promised them. God has promised them, so it's called the promised land, right? Okay, get it? Real clever lame. It's the promised land. So God's promised it to him. So he goes, hey, let's go. I want to send 12 spies in to go look at the land and tell me what you think about it. Let's do a little scouting. So the 12 spies go in, and they look at the land, and they come back, and there's 12 of them. And when it comes time to give a response, two of the spies go, this place is great. We love it. Everybody agreed. Actually, all 12 thought that. But the first 10 said, we went in, and here's the fruit, like it's delicious. It looks great. The land's wonderful. But there's some people living there. They're really big, and there's a lot of them. And it's the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Dietsprites. It's all these guys, all these tribes of people are camped out everywhere. They're everywhere. They're bigger than us. They're bigger than us. And then the two other spies go, yeah, we saw the same thing. The land is good, and it's ours. God promised it to us. We should go up and take possession of the land because we can certainly do it. Because God promised it to us, and he's with us. But the other 10 said, no, they're stronger than we are. They're bigger than we are. And they had this great quote. They go, we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. We seem like grasshoppers in our eyes, and we seem the same to them. How do you know what it seems like to them? You see what they did? This is how I feel about me, so this is what I think about you. We do that all the time. And it could cause us to miss out on what God has promised us. Just because we feel something to be true, we better be careful and make sure it is true. Because we don't just project it on us. We project it on God, on our future, and on the world. And here's the problem with us. We're storytellers. God created us to be storytellers. That's why we love movies and books and a well-told story or a well-written symphony. Symphonies are stories told by music. Like, we love stories. And if you don't believe that about us, look at how we talk about us to each other. I don't know what's going on with you, but I got a hunch. Here's what I heard. Here's what I think. We're storytellers. And when we don't have all the facts, we fill it in based on our filters, our frames, our cognitive biases, how we view things. 12 spies look at the exact same land. 2 say it's great, beautiful, let's go take it. 10 say this land is great, but the people are big. We're like grasshoppers, we can't do it. The facts are not different. It's the filter. How you frame something determines how you will see it. So you've got to be aware of how you do your framing. And a tool that Craig Groeschel introduced to me is called reframing. Reframing is simply this. It's creating a different way of looking at a situation or relationship by changing its meaning. This can work in a good way or a very unhealthy way. We do this all the time. We can create a different way of looking at a situation, a relationship, by changing its meaning by applying something that's not true, or we can reframe it to what is true. Steve Jobs, iPhone, Apple, all that, Pixar. Steve Jobs was known for having this way of looking at life that was the reality distortion field. Reality distortion field. He did this all the time, but he didn't base it on reality and what was true. He didn't have that as a filter. It was what he wanted to be true. You reframe things all the time based on sometimes what we feel or what we want to be true or what we want instead of having a fixed point of reference. But Steve Jobs, they said, if it couldn't be done, he didn't believe it. It served him well in some areas. They said, that's impossible. Okay, I'm going to do it. I want to do it all the more now. He would reframe something. He always believed it was possible. We reframe things all the time, but sometimes we do it in the wrong way. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it. You've probably heard this story before, a story about a little boy who was going out. He had a baseball and a bat, and he goes out, and he tosses up the ball, and he said, I am the greatest hitter in the world. He tossed it up, swing and miss. He said, all right. Even Babe Ruth struck out some. I'm the greatest hitter in the world. Toss up the ball, swing and miss. Still, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. Toss up the ball, swing and miss. 3 strikes. He goes, well, do you know it? I'm also the greatest pitcher in the world. Isn't that amazing? I'm the greatest hitter and the greatest pitcher. Like sometimes we just reframe things. Sometimes it's not always true. But how you reframe things really does matter. How you look at it, how you choose to think about it. And Paul has been our example throughout this series of a guy. He did this all the time. Philippians 4:8 was his filter of what he would allow in and what he would focus on. But he did this reframing all the time. And Paul's dream, he was such a strategic leader. His mission was he wanted everybody to know and follow Jesus. Gave his life to it. Gave his life for it. And he knew strategically if he could just get to Rome and make a difference there, it would have a rippling effect throughout the Roman Empire that could change the world. Everybody could hear if he could just reach Rome. So his dream, his vision, his goal was to reach Rome. And one day he did. But he didn't reach Rome as a preacher. He reached Rome as a prisoner. And he finds himself in Rome under house arrest, chained to a guard 24 hours a day. He could have looked at that situation. Said, my dream was to be a preacher in Rome, and now I'm a prisoner in Rome. It's like almost, but not quite, and it's not, I'm locked up. And so if there was a version of the Bible called the New Winer's Translation, there isn't, but if there was, it would read this from Paul. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what's happened to me really stinks. As a result of the hell I've been through, I'm quitting this mission and never going back to church. He could have said that. He could have whined, but he had a different frame and filter. Instead, this is what he really wrote. This is a translation, that New International Version. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, because they were looking at what was going on to him with going, are you okay? Like, seriously, like, we know what your dream was. We were giving money. We were praying, hoping you get to Rome. not as a prisoner. He goes, I want you to know that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. He said, no. I have a different frame here. I'm not stuck. I'm not taken out of the game. I am in the game. He reframed it. It simply means to look at something differently. And then he says this, as a result, because of this change, because he's in prison, because of what could have been viewed as bad, no, here's the good thing that happened. It has become clear throughout the whole palace guard. Every day, Paul had a Roman soldier watching him for 8 hours. And then that guy would leave, or those guys would leave, and new ones would come in for 8 hours. And they would leave, and new ones come in. Every 8 hours, he had a new audience. They were strategically placed in the Roman Empire as Roman guards, that if he could talk to them, and what are they going to do? They're supposed to guard him. They can't leave. Who's really the prisoner here, right? Paul's like, hey, what are you doing for the next 8 hours? Oh, yeah, you're sitting right here. Have I got something to tell you? And it became clear throughout the whole palace guard. And to everyone else that I'm in chains for Christ, they go, we know what you're about. You're about Jesus. Then verse 14, it says this. Because of my chains, because of what could have been a bad thing, it could have been something that we're sad about or we're grieving. No, we're celebrating my change because most of the brothers and sisters, others, have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Sometimes when you reframe something and see it from a godly perspective or a truthful perspective, it has a rippling effect on how others see the situation too. Moms, dads, parents, grandparents, how you frame things can impact your kids. Kids, how you frame things can impact your parents. You can impact your friends, teachers, your students, your teachers, coaches, your athletes. Like everybody can have influence. And sometimes there is a good result from a bad situation because you had a good choice about your filter, about your frame, about the way you would think about it differently. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it. And a lot of us, we have thoughts popping in our head all the time to say hello. And we just kind of like, I don't want these coming in. I can't control always what pops in my mind. But I can control how I'll choose to filter it, how I'll use to frame it, how I'll choose to think about it. So how do you reframe your story? How do you reframe your relationships? Here's a couple things to do. One, I'm a big believer in this. You have to define reality. The primary, Max Dupree said, the primary task of leadership is to define reality. You have to be honest, define reality, but look for the possibilities. If it's bad, call it bad. But what are the possibilities here? How could I reframe of how God could bring good from the bad? Or what's the opportunity here? But define reality. Define reality, but look for the possibilities. Second thing, in any situation, gratitude is a huge key. Sometimes a way to think about gratitude is thank God for what didn't happen. Sometimes when something goes bad, we get so focused on that, but sometimes it could have been worse. Could be worse. Could be raining, right? Like, think on what's positive. Thank God for what didn't happen. For instance, when I was in college, now this was before the day and age of cell phones, after the Pony Express and Telegraph, before cell phones. So in every phone, our phones were actually like hanging on walls in our homes, but there were multiple phones, but they all had one line. So if multiple people picked up, you were on the call with each other. So one day in college, I called home. My mom answered. I said, Mom, you better get Dad on the line. So he went to the other phone, picked it up. I said, Mom, Dad, I'm so glad you're listening. I got to tell you something. I was running late for my test in accounting. And I was running very late, and I was very low on money, and I was very low on gas. And I ran by the gas station. I didn't have any money, so I pumped the gas and I left. As I was leaving, I was late for my test, so I was speeding. And I wasn't sure if they were after me because I didn't pay for the gas, so I tried to outrun the policeman. As I tried to outrun them, it got pretty dangerous and hectic. No one got hurt, but eventually I got caught, and they took me to jail. But the good news is, while I was in jail, I met some new friends, and long story short, I'm now part of a gang. And and I said, Mom and Dad, I just want you to know that none of that's true. But I did fail my accounting test, which doesn't seem so bad now, does it, right? Sometimes if you think about what didn't happen, it kind of helps. Like, well, I got in a wreck, but at least no one was hurt, or at least I had insurance, or I didn't get my bonus, but at least I have a job, or man, I had to pay taxes, but at least I had income. Like, sometimes we just have to reframe things for ourselves, but please be careful about doing this for others. If someone loses somebody, yes, it's true, I'm glad they're in a better place, but sometimes just grieve. Don't just say, well, at least they're not in pain anymore. Like, I know, but right now I'm just really sad. Be careful about doing this for others, but be intentional about doing this for yourself. Focus on the good or what didn't happen or how it could have been worse. But be honest about what did happen. Because if you're not honest about what did happen, your brain will not rest. Our brains are relentless. This is why some of us are worriers, which we're going to talk about that next week, about how to have a peace of mind. Some of us are worriers because of this one problem. This one thing is why your brain will not leave you alone. Your brain needs you to acknowledge when there's a threat. It was God designed it that way, so when his other creation, the bear or the shark, showed up, we wouldn't say, oh, I love animals. We would be cautious and say, that's a threat. I'm going to take a step away. Some of us have not defined reality. We have not acknowledged what did happen and told our brains, I see it, I'm dealing with it, stand down. I've got a plan here. Your brain is going to always be firing off chemicals and electricity throughout your body to say, there's a threat here. Do you see what's happening? But sometimes it's helpful to say to your brain, hey, I've got this, but also here's what didn't happen. Let me think about this differently. And a key to doing that is look at it with gratitude. Be thankful. Gratitude is a huge solution to many of our problems because it has this hugely helpful impact on our brain. Lenses of gratitude help you see the world differently. Because usually we see what we don't have and we're looking past what we do. Gratitude sometimes is a huge solution to many of our problems. The other thing, we talked about reframing moments. Here's what some of us do, especially if you're going to the same situation again and again and again, and it's a mental battle for you. Not just reframing, but pre-framing. Pre-framing simply means this. I'm going to think about something differently before I even get there. Maybe you're not a morning person. You know, there's two types of people in the world. There's morning people and people who hate morning people, right? Like, that's how the world is kind of created. And morning people, man, you just have something that I don't have, and really, quite honestly, I don't appreciate. Like, you just get up and you seem happy and joyful, and I just have a roommate like that, and boy, I really liked him in the afternoons, but I didn't like him so much in the mornings. But man, some people just wake up and they have a positive mindset. Some of us don't. We wrestle with that. But what if you started doing some advanced work the night before to say, hey, tomorrow when I wake up, here's 3 things I'm grateful for. Here's something I'm excited about. Or here's an opportunity tomorrow that I'm really excited about. Sometimes just doing some of that advanced work of pre-framing. Because our thoughts or our frames that we have shape what we experience. So if you know you're going to fight the same battle again and again, pre-frame it. Practice advanced decision making. I know that I tend to think of it this way. I'm going to choose to think about it truthfully this way. Some of us, it's worry. I know that these certain moments are triggers for my worry, so I'm going to decide ahead of time how I'm going to think about it. Or I have a tendency to complain, so I'm going to decide ahead of time before I ever complain. I'm always going to be thankful and look for the positive. We know that we might walk into a situation and tend to be negative, so we decide, I'm going to decide ahead of time. That's not, I'm going to pre-frame the moment to what I know to be true. And one way that helps with that, and makes all those other things possible, is in any given moment, always be looking for the goodness of God. Because he's promised he's present. And he's promised that he's good. So always be looking for it. It doesn't mean that everything that happens is good. But a lot of times we see what's wrong, and we think that God's not there or that he does not care. You have to think about how you're going to think about things So think about always be looking, like playing a game of Where's Waldo or some kind of I Spy game where you're always looking for the goodness of God. That is a proof of the goodness of God. That is a proof of the goodness of God. Always be looking for that. Because generally, you're going to find what you're looking for. Let me give you an illustration on that. Here's two different kind of birds. Vulture, hummingbird. Two very different birds. I would picture morning person, not morning person, right? If you're a morning person, I didn't mean to offend you, but I probably did. A vulture wakes up every morning looking for what? Dead stuff, roadkill, carcasses. Isn't that an awful word? A carcass. Like, that's what they wake up looking for. They're looking for the worst stuff that if we would see it, we'd go, oh, that's awful. It's gross. What does a hummingbird wake up every day looking for? Nectar, sweet stuff. They wake up. What you're looking for, you're going to find it. So wake up tomorrow deciding, I'm not going to be a vulture. I'm not going to wake up looking for the dead stuff in this world, the negative stuff. I'm not going to look for the negative in you or what's wrong with you, what's wrong with the world, what's wrong with the politician, what's wrong with my teacher, my coach, my student. Like, I'm going to wake up looking for what's good, for what's right, for what's lovely, for what's pure, what's excellent, what's praiseworthy. Because they're both there. We're a mess. We're knuckleheads. We know that. There's a lot. If what you're going to look for, you're going to find. So wake up looking for what's right. If you want to see what's bad, you're going to find it. If you want to see what's good, you're going to find that. If you want to see what's negative, you're going to find it. Same thing with positive. If you wake up looking for challenges, you're going to find it. But if you can reframe it as opportunities, you're going to find it. Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. This is what he does. Who have been called according to his purpose. Always look for the goodness of God because he said he's always working things for good. He defines reality and says that not all things are good. He does not say everything's good, just be thankful. He says even the worst stuff in life, the stuff that has vultures swirling around, he says I can even bring good out of that. Look for the goodness of God. It's there. And I promise you can find it. This is not just positive thinking. This is not just turn that frown upside down. This is a God who has a character of goodness and is actively working that in all things going on in your life right now, he is working for the good of you, for his good purposes, for what he wants to accomplish in your life. So do some cognitive reframing. If God works in all things for good, look for it. Reject the things that are unhealthy default frames like how you see yourself or the world or life or even God. Always look for the goodness of God. And one of the things that's been most helpful for me is I needed to flip the lenses. And I've told this story before. I went to the Masters several years ago, the golf tournament. Tell that for two reasons. One, I wanted to brag. I went to the Masters. But secondly, when I was there, I got these binoculars. And they were kind of expensive, and they weren't that, but at least they weren't that good. But I'm going to look for the positive. I was at the Masters, and I had something that helped me see something that was that far away, feel like it was that far away. So as I'm looking through these lenses, I could see golfers hitting a little bit better. Brought what was far and made it close. When I got home, my kids, who were very young at the time, started looking at them, and they were looking at them, trying to look around, but they were looking at them backwards. So what would happen if they were looking through binoculars backwards? What was close feels like it's far away. It has the reverse effect. And so I said, hey, no, Jean and Gracia, you need to flip that around. You need to flip it around. And it was like through that moment I realized I do this all the time. I look the wrong way at my circumstances and God. And what you need to do is not interpret your God through your circumstances, but instead interpret your circumstances through the goodness of God. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God's character is consistent and unchanging. God has promised that he is good and always working for good. I know that to be true, but if I look through that truth and his character through the lens of what's happening to me right now, well, this is awful. God doesn't care. God seems very, very small and far away. God's disinterested. God's mad at me. God's punishing me. This is karma. Like, whatever it is, I can interpret things the wrong way. But I flip it around, and I look at what I'm going through the lens of God's character, of his goodness, of his promises, of what I know to be true. It helps me look for his goodness in the middle of stuff that God himself would say, in this world you will have trouble. And here it is. This is not good, but I will not waste it. My goodness will show up, and I can bring goodness through that. But if you're not looking for it, you could miss it. And what you think about shapes you. It shapes how you see the world. It shapes how you respond and how you act and what you say, who you become. So you've got to practice interpreting your circumstances through the goodness of God and his promises. One of the psalmists said this. By the way, this is our memory verse for the week if you look on the app. And it's also a resource we made available in another way. I'll tell you about in a minute. The psalmist said, "My flesh and my heart may fail." You ever felt that way? Like your body's breaking down. Suddenly the font needs to be bigger and bigger and bigger. Or your health, like you realize you're out of warranty. And you know, there's no more replacement parts. Like like sometimes your body, your mind, your spirit, it fails. But God, here's the way to frame it. That may be true, but God is the strength of my heart. God is stronger than I am. And he's my portion forever. He is what I will seek to be my fulfillment. It's a way of reframing. It's flipping things around of how I'm going to look at it. If I just look at it through the lens of this, I think God has abandoned me. But if I recognize that God's in the middle of this working for his good, I understand more who God is, and I experience it to be true myself. What we've challenged you to do throughout this series is build your think tank. The reservoir, like you have a gas tank of where your automobile draws gas from, or it's like on your computer where you have things on your computer that are stored there that you can reference later. We want you to build a think tank that has these promises. This is the one I just read. This week it's on my phone because we have these cards that you can pick up. They're by the door as you leave today in the foyer. Or we have these lock screens. This verse, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is my strength, my strength and my heart and my portion forever." I've got that on my lock screen this week. I want to be remembered of that. I want to be reminded of who God is in the middle of what's going on that may not be good. So we have these for you. You can find them here. You can go scattered throughout the foyer, as well as the lock screens are under Sunday resources on the Live Oak app, the Live Oak website, or the digital bulletin, which you can scan the QR code on most of the chairs in front of you. Build your think tank. Build these things that you're going to draw from to the godly truth that you're going to say, this is my focus. I'm going to displace what's not true and replace it with what is true. Focus is your friend if you're focused on the right things and what's true. So this week, do some mental meal planning for your week. What will you think about? Practice reframing moments. I've typically looked at it this way. I'm going to reframe it through the goodness of God. I'm going to do some pre-framing. I know when I talk to that person, I tend to get spun up. So here's what I'm going to count on in that moment. I know this moment is challenging. I'm going to think about it differently. Reframing is simply creating a different way of looking at it. I would challenge you to do that through the lens of God's goodness and truth. You cannot control what happens to you this week. You can't. But you can control how you'll frame it, how you'll think about it, and what you'll pursue to put in your brain. Let's pray. God, thanks for gifting us very powerful minds. It can work for us if we use them right and we follow your instructions. It can work against us if we just let it go and pay it no attention, feed it the wrong things, or focus on the wrong things. God, help us to focus on the truth, to focus on you, Jesus, who promises that you are the way, the truth, and the life. And I pray that we put your truth in our minds, and that would be our filter of how we would see all else, everyone else, at all times. God, we need your help with that. Help us to fight for the right mind that you had in mind for us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Next week, we're going to be in part 4 of Think, and we're going to talk about how do you find peace of mind. And next week, we're having baptisms. here immediately following the service at noon, probably about 12:05, following the 11 a.m. service. Here's how you can sign up. It's not too late to sign up if you're interested. If it's your next step, go to Sign Up and Events on our app, website, digital bulletin to get started. Thanks for being here. Have a great week.